Ready to soundtrack your summer? With Red Bull Summer All Day Play, you choose a playlist that fits your summer vibe the best. Are you a festival fanatic, a deep-end DJ, a road dog, or a trail mixer? Just add a song to your chosen playlist and put your summer on track. Red Bull Summer All Day Play. Red Bull gives you wings. Visit redbull.com/brightsummer ahead to learn more. See you this summer.
It's time to bring on the blooms at the Home Depot with spring garden deals. Find savings on hanging baskets and flowers to brighten your backyard or any space that needs instant color. Then get everything you need to plant and protect them with low prices guaranteed on soil and mulch. Dig into spring garden deals for 4 days at the Home Depot. Now through May 10th. Exclusions apply. See homedepot.com/price match for details.
Hi, we're Crooked Shapes, and you're listening to Jay Scott on The Hook Rock. Check out our debut self-titled album out now.
You know she made me rock and roll again. Put the swagger in my soul again. Push me back across the line again. And put the writing on the wall. Let a fire under my behind. Got me high, didn't cost a dime. One thing for certain, I can tell you, my friend, my baby made me rock and roll again. She knew me well, it never failed. She knew just how to put the wind back in my sail. She got the key to set me free. It's just so easy to see where she made me rock and roll again. Put the dirty in my mind again. Ain't nothing to it, boy, she pulled me back in. My baby made me rock and roll again. Yeah, she made me rock and roll again.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to The Hook Rocks, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Scott. Thanks for tuning in again. Thanks for listening. We are part of the Pantheon Podcast Network, great platform of music-related podcasts. There's so much different styles of podcasts and music-related topics that are covered on Pantheon. There's something there for everyone. You can check out some of my friends, like the Shout Out Loudcast with Tom and Zeus, the Hangin' and Bangin' with Carmen Apice, Vinny Appice, and Ron and Esty, Mistress Carrie out on the East Coast, Martin Popoff, the rock historian, and also Cobras and Fire out there in Minnesota. I've had Baco on the show too as well. He's a great guy. And follow them on Twitter at Pantheon Pods. You can also look them up, pantheonpodcast.com. Check them out on Facebook. You can also follow The Hook Rocks on Twitter at The Hook Rocks. Look us up also on Facebook, and follow us wherever you do podcasts, on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, on any platform. And don't forget to set your app to automatic download so you get the latest and greatest Hook Rocks episode right to your phone. Makes your commute to work so much more enjoyable, makes your honey-do list so much more exciting, and it lessens the stress you have in your life. It's guaranteed to do that. Of course, I'm joking. At any rate, check out some of our recent episodes. We just had Aaron Alden on from the Real Me podcast, which tackles Teen Cancer America, or sponsored by Teen Cancer America. It's a charity that was developed by Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend of The Who, where it talks about the healing power of music and how they work with teenagers and young adults to write and produce music, write and produce their songs. It's very inspiring, so check that out. All the stories are on the Real Me podcast. We also interviewed Phil Lewis from LA Guns, as well as some new bands, The Odd Even, and also Seven Stone. So check those out. We have some more coming up, too, as well. Some great new music spotlights around the holidays. The year's almost over, folks, and we're going to be talking about the year in rock with our next guest. I'm so excited to have these guys on. We've been talking about doing this for a while. I had the coincidental meeting with one of their hosts at a recent concert in Chicago. I'd like to welcome in Aaron, Daniel, Casey from the Itch Rockin' and Radio podcast. How are you guys?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're doing well. Thank you.
Doing
Awesome.
fantastic.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, glad to have you guys on board. Glad to have you guys on the Hook Rocks. I know to tell the story that we were talking about offline before we began, I had the pleasure of meeting Aaron at the Dead show recently in Chicago. Just by chance, we were both in the same section as the concert was going on, and he started talking to me. I started talking to him. I looked down at his shirt, and it's got the Itch podcast logo.
There it is.
That one of you members is wearing today. But I'm like, hey, I think I kind of know you, and he's like, what do you mean? I go, I'm Jay Scott from the Hook Rocks. He's like, oh, no way. So we talked. It was great. It made the concert so much better. It was a great show. But again, It was nice to finally, put a face to a name, which is what we do so often on here. We basically hear people instead of see people. But it's great to have you guys finally on. Great to finally coordinate this and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Yes.
Lesson learned: if you have merch of your own podcast, wear it. It'll come in handy once in a while.
Yeah, that shirt was designed by Aaron too.
Yeah,
because my head was like, wait a minute, hold on, what's going on? Like, I know that logo, and
no, that was a super fun concert, and I think that day was might have been my first shows back again since the pandemic.
Wow.
And so it was already a memorable day because I'd been to Riot Fest earlier.
Yep.
And then in the evening left Riot Fest to go see the Deads. And so it was a whole memorable thing. And it was definitely cool to see you there and have somebody to be at shows with, since I'm in Chicago and Dan and Casey are in St. Louis.
Hey man, anytime you want to hit a show together, I think I might be done for the rest of the year. Although Yngwie Malmsteen is playing in a couple of weeks, and I may go check that out. But there's a whole bunch of stuff happening after the first of the year. As you know, there's been a lot of shows announced. Yeah. But yeah, I've been to, I think 16 or 17 shows this year. And that just I started in June.
Okay.
So,
wow. That's impressive.
That is good. That is good.
Your kids, like you said, are obviously much older.
Yes.
Jay's got an insane work ethic for this show. And going to shows, I'm pretty sure you do that anyway, but all the better when you can get, use it as material as well.
Yeah. No, it is. It's definitely a busy hobby. It's one that I enjoy. Love talking music. I mean, it's either watch TV and hear all the horrible things on the news and why we should be scared of everything or talk rock and roll 3-4 times a week. So that's kind of where I'm at in my life.
That's a good spot to be.
You made the right call.
Yes. So as you guys know, we always start the same way every time we have first-time guests on the podcast. And it's really about the show and what we're all about and what the essence is. And that question is, just like every rock song has a hook that sucks you in, every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, an album, a band, or performance that hooked them on rock and roll. What was it for you guys?
Who wants to start?
One of you guys are going to have to start because I'm trying to pinpoint if there actually is like a moment. I think I just slid into it.
I'll go ahead and start.
Do it.
My parents were huge into classic rock, and my dad actually played music and was in a band with my uncle and my mom. And my dad took me to my first concert at 13, which was The Who. So it was a very memorable experience. So rock and roll was always around at my household growing up, and left a pretty substantial impact on me, still to this day, obviously.
Yeah, mine was kind of the same. My mom was huge into classic rock. We listened to the same station that Casey grew up on. But for me, like the thing that really hooked me was when I think it was 1996, Christmas of 96, actually, I got the Metallica Load album for Christmas. And I will never forget that because I just became a huge Metallica fan and just, started going down the rabbit hole from there.
See, I didn't get quite that upbringing. I grew up around what's called CCM, or contemporary Christian music. And so there's rock in there, but most of it was not good. Somewhere along the lines, I just started sort of morphing or finding the bands that were good in that genre, and then morphing also outside of it and discovering more things. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but like I remember early on, I got like cassettes from like the Cranberries, and I think Primus might have been one of my first CDs. And so somewhere along the line, I distinctly remember having the thought, I don't know why bands would make music without distortion when they have the option of making music with distortion. And I don't entirely feel that way today, but I still oftentimes do.
So you guys have a wide variety of influences. You guys come from different places with your music. How did you guys all start? How did you guys all meet?
Me and Casey have known each other since we were 15, I think, right?
Yeah.
And,
We've known each other since sophomore year of high school.
Yeah. I don't know, just kind of we're drawn to each other somehow. And then became really good friends freshman year of college when we went to the same school. And that's where we all kind of met, was freshman year of college, and found that we all had a love of the same music, and we wanted to share that love with the radio station. But the radio station that we were at only played adult contemporary, and the previous rock show that was on the station notoriously went down in flames. And so we just knew that, like, as we became friends, that we would all have to really prove ourselves if we wanted to achieve our goal, because we all had the same goal of becoming, kind of just working on the radio and playing music and sharing music for everybody.
Yeah, our interests aligned because we liked each other, we liked music, and we're all communication majors, so we were vying for time slots on the radio station in St. Charles, and so that became our pitch for what would become then the Itch radio show.
Yeah. And we continued it on after college because we were still around and they still let us do it. So until the pandemic, we did the show for about 16 years. And then the pandemic happened and shut us down for almost 2 years now. But we're getting ready to go back here in a little bit.
Super excited.
Yeah. Every Sunday night, 3 hours of mostly hard rock music. We move a little bit in different directions to the sides of that, but that's our meat and potatoes. Classic.
So the adult contemporary station that you guys worked at, you guys weren't buying any Michael Bolton or John Cicada albums at that point, were you?
No,
it was worse than that. It was like Scissor Sisters and
Wilson Phillips.
It was. How did I describe it? On
Melissa Etheridge.
Yeah,
that's not too bad though. That's not too bad.
It's just
no.
Yeah, it wasn't us.
It could have been worse. Before we got there, it was actually all bluegrass. So
okay.
We were at least blessed to not have to sit through that.
I like bluegrass, but even then, a whole station all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I can stand it
for
like
college,
a song
on
here
a college.
And there. Yeah,
Aaron, the next time Todd Snyder plays Chicago, we got to go.
I'm not familiar, but now I will have to be.
Yes, Todd Snyder's like a bluegrass folk singer. He's awesome.
All right,
awesome.
I'm in.
You definitely enjoy. He's like a great storyteller too, with like in between the songs. Very funny. Look him up on YouTube. I love that. You'll definitely enjoy it.
Chris Thiele is one of my favorites, and he's the same exact way. It's half of his show is virtuoso talent, and the other half is charisma and absurd banter from the stage.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So as far as you guys, during the pandemic, you started the podcast. Was that started because of the pandemic?
Yeah. Aaron had been nagging us to do it for years, honestly. And looking back at it, I really wish we would have taken that time to get started sooner, because we've made a lot of ground and just met some incredible people in a year and a half. And so, it was because of the podcast that forced us to do it, because we went a whole month without doing the radio show. And I was like, I gotta do something. I gotta talk about music. I gotta get out.
Dan, how the podcast proper started was Dan texted Casey and I, and he was like, "Hey, do you guys want to get together and just talk about music for a while?" Because it had been like 2 months since we'd been able to do the show. And I was like, this is my moment. I can get them. I can make something out of this. And so all of our interests aligned. We really wanted to talk music, but we didn't have a radio station then. So, but podcasting has an incredibly low barrier to entry. So we just started one and started rolling.
It's basically just, a pulse and, a heartbeat, basically. You could start a podcast.
Yeah. A mic and like $10 a month and you're good for somebody to host the thing. And that's about it.
No, it's the truth. But I do find that though, with a lot of rock music fans, is that we love talking music just as much as we like listening as well. Like that kind of feeds the beast, so to speak, right? When you're talking amongst friends or you're talking amongst other rock fans, it helps you discover other music. It helps give you a different perspective on what maybe someone else is hearing through their ears. It's a very interesting aspect. I don't know if a lot of other genres are like that. I've never experienced, obviously, I'm not a country music fan, so I don't know, what they sit around, a table and talk about country music or pop music. I don't really think that really happens with pop music, because most pop music fans are music consumers. They're not they're not fans, but in my opinion. But yeah, I think that with rock and roll, everybody, I don't know if there's another genre that has its fans be so passionate about the music. And what's interesting about you guys is I'm a little bit older, and you guys are rock fans, but you guys are kind of like the rock fans that came after my group, which is really cool. Yeah. Which is really cool because, admittedly, it took me a while to get used to that style that came into play after 80s rock, after all the glam scene, after, bands like Priest and Maiden. You had like this surge in flannels and more important themes and lyrics to their songs. And at first it was such a culture shock because you're so used. I mean, people like to bag on 80s rock, but that was around for a good 13 years, from like the early 80s to the early to mid 90s. So it really did have sustaining power. It wasn't just 15 minutes and it was gone. So as a kid growing up in that and listening to it, you were kind of used to that mold of music. And then, boom, it was gone. And you had Nirvana, and you had Pearl Jam, you had Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, which Soundgarden and Alice in Chains I connected with immediately because they had a little bit more of a harder edge for me. Whereas with Pearl Jam and Nirvana, it took me a while. I'm still trying to find my connection with Nirvana. But and as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate and like Pearl Jam a lot more. But there were so many other bands that came after that too. But it's really cool to hear your perspective on music, because it's kind of like right after my perspective, right after what I went through. So that's why I appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting with our show is we kind of tried to model it after our radio show and just kind of discuss the music that we would typically be playing from week to week. But then also, additionally, the cool part is becoming friends with shows like yourself and just numerous other shows that we've become friends with. And it's such a huge community. And, it's funny, you mentioned us being a little younger. Well, we've become friends with a show that's a little younger than us, which is even more interesting. So it's this giant circle, but we're all connected, and it's really cool.
I think one of my first memories of encountering the Hook was listening to the 2020 like top 20 countdown at the end, and I thought it was fantastic because I'm like, we're both rock radio show or rock podcasts. I think we had one album in common between the two of us, because like you said, like your stuff is that you guys tend to gravitate towards is a little more influenced by classic rock sounds, southern rock sounds, maybe
blues rock,
and a lot of what we gravitate towards is influenced by 90s sounds, by the grunge and the like alternative metal and that kind of thing. What's that?
And new metal,
metal, that kind of stuff. I think the album, for the record, I believe it was the Rival Sons album, if I'm not mistaken.
Feral Roots, great album.
Yeah, which ranked super high, maybe even number one on both of our lists. Yeah, and so I thought that was great that we had this. We're both in the rock world, but the Venn diagram of the overlap was so small just because there's that much good music out there across the spectrum.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's great. I know a lot of people from, my group of rock music fans really, and still to this day, resist the era that came after, the alternative era, if you will. I hear it all the time. No good rock music has come out since after 1992, which is complete BS.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to hear that to me is disappointing, especially now that there's such a resurgence of newer bands and new rock and EW, and what's happening in the scene today. And that's really what we're going to talk about is when you look pre-pandemic and you look at the conversation and you look at the words that were used to describe rock music, those words were irrelevant. Those words were rock is dead. Those words were there's no good new bands. That was the perception of mainstream music fans, whether you're in the US or any other country. And at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of us felt like, man, this could be the final nail in the coffin for rock music, because rock music relies so much on the live show, relies so much on the live entity and connecting with its fans when you go see them. I mean, that's how you really become a real rock fan, is once you see it live, it's in your blood, whether it's Pearl Jam, whether it's Metallica, whether it's Motley Crue, whether it's Santana. Once you see it, and once you feel that synergy with a crowd, you can't get rid of it. You can't shake it. So not having a tour, or any bands touring it, if you will, a lot of us felt like, man, this is going to be bad for rock music. And I think quite the opposite has happened. I think probably starting in late fourth quarter or mid fourth quarter of 2020. Gosh.
Yeah, the lost year.
Yeah.
It's so hard to capture time.
The long ago.
Right.
Yeah,
but it
the
really,
4 times.
I think it really started with that AC/DC album in November of last year, because everybody was sitting at home. Everybody was looking for something different. And you had this band that everyone's looked at as kind of old reliable. AC/DC has released the same album for 30 plus years, almost 40 years. And here they are releasing Power Up, which is a tribute to Malcolm Young, but they used his recorded riffs, in the album, and everybody seemed to connect with that album and rally around that record. And I think it propelled the resurgence, if you will, into 2021 with so much great music. Like every week you're turning around and you're like, oh my God, there's a new great album out. Oh geez, there's a new great album. I mean, it's been nonstop,
right?
Since about probably February, March, it's been about nonstop. And I think it's great for all of us who are rock fans to see that resurgence. And I think the conversation is totally different now. I think the conversation is, what's next? How is this going to keep building? How is this going to keep growing? I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things, other than just, shows not existing and bands not being able to tour, a lot of bands, I think, were just confused on what they should do with the new music that they had. And should they release it now? Should they wait until it's over and they can tour again? Or should we scrap that and remake a whole nother album? I think a lot of artists took a lot of different directions, and the end result was we have tons of stuff that's been released and going to be released, and it's a fantastic time to be a fan of rock music, I think.
Well, I don't think I was never worried. And one of the reasons why is because one of the things that brings rock people together is that all of us use rock music as our therapy. And throughout the time, of the pandemic, a lot of us either resorted to listening to the tons of music or, soaking up as much music as we possibly could. Or if you're an artist, they spent that time writing music. And I think that what we're seeing now is just the fruits of all that labor, whether it's like Casey said, they went into the studio and kind of just kept tweaking stuff that they already had recorded, or that they use that time to record stuff, and then now it's coming out, it's been produced and mixed and everything, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor is what I think is happening now.
Yeah, I think I remember the first probably handful of months of the podcast, we made repeated mentions of how we were basically waiting for music to start coming out because everybody was sitting on the albums that they had finished because for sensible reasons. And so we were struggling at that point to find nearly enough new stuff that was worth talking about. And then it was like, you know, as soon as things started to open up again a little bit, or kind of like you mentioned, probably fourth quarter last year, it was like, I don't know, somebody just like shook up a bottle of soda and opened it up, and there's just new music everywhere, spraying the new music all over the place.
True.
It's hard to keep up with.
And so and half of these albums, like Dan was talking about, they were completed pre-pandemic and they're just now coming out, or sometimes they would. We had this cool guest feature, or we got to add these parts to this song. And so the stuff that's coming out is oftentimes better than it would have been at that time, even though we had to wait through that delay.
And I think that the rock industry got smarter. I mean, even myself, as you know, I can say that I'm still a stubborn CD buyer.
So am I.
But I think that whether it's record companies or artists themselves just got smarter in how they release music. You know, they're releasing a single at a time. They're not like releasing that one single and then like, okay, there's the album, and then we're going to release another single and we're going to release another single. They've been releasing all the singles prior to the album coming out. And like, once that album comes out, it's like, yeah, well, it's out, you know, you can get everything now. So it's cheaper, obviously, product, because they don't have to worry about the casing and the packaging and all that stuff.
I was talking to a member of a newer band in January, after we recorded the podcast that he was on, and he said everyone's swinging for the fences with these new albums that are coming out, and he wasn't lying, because I can't think of. I could probably count the albums that I haven't. I shouldn't say. I never like to use the word bad. I haven't connected with. Probably on one hand. Whereas the opposite is, you know, I'm thinking about doing the year-end list that we always do. Mm-hmm. And I just had a panic attack. Like, my God, like who am I going to leave out?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's going to be such a difficult decision because there's so many great albums, and it's not just like the new bands too. There's some legacy artists that are releasing some really good stuff right now. Jerry Cantrell just released a fantastic album. LA Guns' new album is absolutely just crushes it. Dee Snider's Leave a Scar is just absolutely fantastic. And then you've got your new bands. You've got your, like, as we saw, the Dead Deads, and you have Mammoth, Pretty Reckless. So many bands that are just Mastodon just came out with their brand new album. Was it last week or the week before?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
That's an absolute masterpiece.
Well, and so then like we just, I don't know about you, but I know me and Aaron watched a whole bunch of Welcome to Rockville this past weekend that streamed live on an app this weekend, and it was amazing. Like, seeing all these young artists like White Collar and Broken Love. Like, there were some really, really good young bands there. The Warning was another one. Dorothy, which I think Dorothy's kind of been around, but you know, these are still bands that I hadn't even heard about until this stream. And I had a fantastic weekend of watching concerts all weekend. Like, it was so awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
But you know, and it's funny, dude. I did want to mention that because, like, rock definitely feeds off the fans, because I love watching concerts on the television, but those concerts wouldn't be the same if there wasn't a crowd in front of the artists. Like, you know, if they're just playing in a studio, it's not the same feeling. They don't get that same energy as what they would in front of a giant crowd like they did.
Yeah. The Warning is an incredible band. Those three sisters, man. I mean, the arrangements of those songs and the power of those songs is just absolutely incredible.
And their fans are rabid.
Yes, they are.
So yeah, we were watching this stream on Twitch, and there was a chat going on the whole time. And, you know, people are excited about a lot of bands, but The Warning, I believe, was the last day of 4.
Yes.
And their people were in there all 4 days, like, waiting and hyping it up. just being overjoyed to see the warning. And so like they probably were the most mentioned band just in that chat room, which was very interesting to me.
Yeah, I had them on the show at the end of September, and I experienced their fan base, which was awesome. It was incredible. Yes.
I think I heard that one. They had a lot of energy.
Yeah, I listened to that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they were fun. But I think you're touching on a couple of really interesting things in there in terms of, where rock has been this year and where it's going. Like you mentioned, we got these legacy artists coming out with stuff like the Iron Maiden album came out, was met very positively as well. And they're like, metal OGs right there. So,
yes.
And then you have these throwback artists. You mentioned Mammoth, who is sort of in between, he's comes from a legacy, but he himself is a fresh young man. And then you got bands like Dirty Honey that has a very distinct classic rock sound to them. And their albums picked up a lot of steam. It's a very good one. And so you have a lot of these, like either, people who come from this, the past of rock and are still relevant in the present. Dee Snider was a great mention. That guy's probably more important to rock today than he was, whenever his initial hits came out. And so, and then you have bands like Dan had mentioned, some of these ones that were performing at the festival. There's a lot of younger bands and a lot of bands that are so diverse. Like there's a lot of women-led bands that are super hot right now that are picking up steam. The Hailstorm Evanescence tour is coming around. The Deads that we both loved. We just talked with Eva Under Fire. It was really cool.
Plush is another band that's making headway.
Yeah, you have bands that are young. You have bands that are diverse. Like there's Rockers of Color. There was a band called Hero, the band that performed at
Great band
at Rockville. Yeah, and it's cool to see, and I think that's what's resonating with younger music fans as well, is seeing the music branch out to being to visibly being a thing for everyone, if that makes sense.
And I feel that it always has been. It's just now visibly, there.
Yeah.
Because there's been bands that I've enjoyed from all over the world.
Oh yeah,
but you just don't. You don't see where you don't see them all the time because they're not really touring all the time. Things like that.
Yeah.
That is true, because I had a conversation with Chris Lane, who's the guitar player for the band Station, and they're a very throwback to the AOR music like Journey and Night Ranger, that kind of style. And he did say something really important in the interview where years ago it was the scene in Hollywood, right? It was the Sunset Strip, then it was Seattle. Now the scene is so global, where a band that you may have never heard of 25 years ago has the access to get their music in front of fans that they would never have done years ago. And I think that's so important and so huge. We talked about The Warning just now. They're from Mexico City. And I don't know if they would have the same pull outside of Latin America had it been the mid-90s. Had it been mid-'80s, I don't know if they would have that huge fan base at such an early stage of their career because of the internet, because of streaming platforms, because of social media. And I think that's awesome. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's led to where we are exactly with rock, is that you have such ease of access to music now that everybody can get their music out there. And not only that, but like, we as listeners have the ability to just listen to music from all over the place. Like we have different apps, we have different radio sources, like you have satellite radio, you have normal radio. That's what I appreciate. There's just so much places to where you can listen to music, and you don't have to pay for it all the time. Like that's what I absolutely love. I can sit there and preview music and then buy it if I wanted to.
Right. Well, and not only that, but just we talk about ease of access, but with the pandemic, we're recording on Zoom right now. That wasn't really a thing until the pandemic happened, and because of that, we're able to talk to artists during the pandemic. And being a podcast, that didn't quite happen as frequently as it does now, and that's another new thing that didn't exist a few years ago. So it's just kind of nuts.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's actually a great thing to mention is that artists are more accessible nowadays. Like you said, we can interview them with Zoom, but they're also more accessible through social media, like Twitter. They respond. Like I know, bands like From Ashes to New, All Good Things, Nonpoint, all of those band members are responsible for their social media outlets, and they will go on there and respond to every single one of their fans. And it's just, you didn't have that, or at least it didn't feel that close, like that you were close to members or had access to that accessibility, 20 years ago. You just didn't, unless you were stalking them at the concert.
I think that's a great point. Like both of those, you have the ease of you don't have to pay all this money into these fancy studios. Like there are ways to get around those things and to be a little more self-made. It's not easy.
Is a good example of that. I mean, it's not easy. He worked at Jelly Roll. A good example of that. He worked his ass off. He's made like 12 albums or something like that.
Something like that.
Just now coming around. He's like, I said this to Hannah. I was like, he's like a minor leaguer that's like been in the minor leagues for all these years and just now getting his chance in the big leagues.
Yeah. And there's so many ways to do that. And like you mentioned, a lot of it can be, you can make a name for yourself just by having a great, interactions with your listeners on social media. You can there's a million ways to put your music out, Bandcamp and SoundCloud and all the Spotify and the streaming platforms. You can get famous
with other artists.
Yeah, that's a good point too. You can get famous by almost pure accident with things like TikTok. Like there's a band that I'm a big fan of called Mother, and they've been around for 15 years. And just over the pandemic, they blew up because a few songs from a decade-old album randomly became sensations on TikTok for a few months. And so now they have this whole new wave of fans that had never heard of them before based on music that is, for their purpose of their career, ancient. And so it's crazy the ways that you can build followings.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the idea that rock and roll is being redefined? The idea that people are redefining rock music. To me, rock music has always been guitar driven. It's always been, guitar vocals up front. You get the pounding drums and the rhythm section behind it. And now it seems like we're defining acts that would never be labeled as rock music as rock music. I think of like Post Malone, for instance,
Yeah.
Jelly Roll along that same line.
Yeah. And I struggle with that because I feel because the genre of rock has struggled the past 2 decades, there's this attempt to encroach on the genre.
I see what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, but we as the Itch, we don't typically like to subcategorize things. I mean, we accept that there are subcategorizations, but the way I kind of like to look at it is rock is like ice cream. Like there's all sorts of different flavors of ice cream, but it's still ice cream. And that's kind of how I feel about rock music. There's awesome. all different rock sounds, but it's all rock music. And it can go together in this Neapolitan type of concoction.
You mean it's not like sherbet?
Yes.
Frozen yogurt.
But I also disagree with what you said with, it being guitar driven, because there's a time in like the 80s where a lot of it was keyboard and synth driven. And it's like rock music tends to go with the fads. And it kind of unfortunately goes along with pop music in the sense that like whatever is popular, like whatever kind of sound seems to be popular in pop music, a lot of artists tend to kind of vary it, have some kind of variant of that sound, and it just tends to meld. Like, I think back in the early 2000s, and Papa Roach, by the way, is a great, if you want to know the way that rock music is going, just listen to Papa Roach. Like the 20-year career that band's been around, they're the chameleons of rock. Whatever trend is happening in rock, they're doing it. And so like, it started out early 2000s. They were a rap rock band. They switched to late 2000s to kind of an emo rock band because that was the trend. Now they're doing like electronic dance music kind of mixed in with their rock music. And it's just, that's what I love Pop Roach. But like, I think that's what is great about rock music is that it can associate all these different things, be the same thing like your ice cream. and still, have guitar, have that thing that I consider makes it rock music. Basically, in my opinion, if you bob your head, if you're rocking your head, it's rock music.
If Dan's gritting his teeth, then it's rock music.
Yes.
That's how... Man, no, those are some good points. I agree with that. And the Pop Roach thing, by the way, is definitely meant to be a compliment.
Yes.
They're not following trends necessarily. They find ways they find ways to incorporate those sounds into making good music of their own. But man, I don't know. I think, cause the person I think of when you talk about that is I think of how, top 40 songs that are in the top 40, I think seems like kind of what you're getting at is rock seems to have less of a presence in there, but there are other things that we might not, as more purists, qualify as such that are showing up. And I think of also someone like Machine Gun Kelly, who is known as a rapper who decided to become a pop punk artist. And because he is such a big name, I was sitting there thinking about that whenever his album came out last year. I'm like, is this a good thing for rock or a bad thing?
Yeah.
That is him joining the fray, like elevating the genre of rock music in the popular opinion again, or is he just a poser, or where on this spectrum? It's probably some of all of any of these things.
If it was terrible, I would have. It's not a bad album.
It's not bad. I can't say
hate him
bad.
as a person. He's such a douchebag as a person, but that album was actually pretty good.
But he's such an interesting example of that, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good.
I just, I don't want to be the, get off my lawn old dude.
Right.
Because I try to be open to new styles and in new music, but I'm not just talking about, recent trends of rock and roll or before these recent trends of rock and roll, I should say, but all the way back to like Chuck Berry and the Beatles and the Stones and all that has come with it. Rock and roll has evolved. And I'm not the biggest fan of subgenres in terms of labeling a band. I basically there's four or five labels for me. There's pop rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and thrash, and probably punk. So I'll probably put I know there's the stoner rock genre, which is basically Black Sabbath's first four albums, influence, but I don't like to do subgenres, and I don't want to be that like, well, this isn't rock and roll. But when I do see bands nominated for Grammys, which we shouldn't care about the Grammys to begin with, I'm like, these aren't rock bands. Or when I hear the band win best rock performance, who was it? Who was it last year? The Killers?
Well, the Killers I would still count as a rock band. I'm
trying to remember who won but they said in their press conference afterwards that blues rock should just go away. And it's like, wait a minute, blues rock is why you're up there.
Right.
I mean, and so I have a tough time with that kind of forced evolution of it. I believe it's being forced.
Yeah. And that's the problem that you have with certain artists is they don't know their history of what came before them, and they don't respect what came before, and they think that they came up with a new trend, but they kind of just followed a trend that happened 20, 30 years ago. And so to those artists, that's the downside. But a lot of the artists, like Greta Van Fleet's a good example. A lot of people, you either love them or you don't, because you think that they're a knockoff of Led Zeppelin. So
yeah, they're either the Zeppelin revival or Zeppelin wannabes, depending on your take.
And I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan, and I love Greta, and I always find it interesting when hardcore Zeppelin fans state, "Oh, they're ripping off Led Zeppelin," and I'm like, "Well, Led Zeppelin ripped off everybody."
Yeah.
Right. And then everybody ripped off them, and so it's just like it's all going to keep happening.
Zeppelin was actually taken to court like 4 or 5 times.
That's true. Yeah.
Can I just state though that the Grammys suck?
Yes,
and they have for like 10 years, because honestly, they don't know what the hell they're doing. They haven't nominated a good rock category. Like, the last time that I think anybody was nominated that was relevant for the category in rock was back when Tim Cummingford jumped on the that was MTV Music Awards, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So the Grammys have never been relevant. So the Grammys, right?
since Nirvana Unplugged or whatever,
Yeah,
but it goes to the point, though. Yes, the Grammys do suck, and no serious rock fan should ever think that the Grammys are the judge and jury of rock music.
Right.
But when you do see the nominations out there, that's when, a person like myself goes, why are we trying to redefine rock music? And I think that's where the core issue.
Yeah, I agree. And I think they know exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is pushing something deliberately that is a little more accessible, and that will probably gain them, more ratings or whatever, viewers for the shows and all that stuff.
Well, it's the RIA trying to sell records, because artists don't make money off of records. Well,
that's the thing is these shows like that, you have to understand what their place is, and it's all a marketing ploy largely. And so if you remove the expectation that there's going to be good rock represented, and even if there is good rock on the show, that it will be televised instead of announced on the internet somewhere without anybody paying attention, then that changes a little bit. But I do agree. I think Jay has a point, because I look at that and I feel like you're like training people to view rock as something that it definitely isn't. Right. Like, you just took the bands that qualify in all these other genres and for some reason slid them into this category instead, or in addition to, when you've already nominated them in pop or hip hop or whatever.
Speaking of, so the 2021 rock and roll induction ceremony is going to be on TV this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of going along exactly with what you were saying, because I'm pretty sure one of the nominations was Jay-Z, which is just a bit odd, because he's not rock. Like, he's definitely hip hop. But
that's another.
And I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but it's just it's kind of like it goes to what you're saying. Like, are we including him in rock and roll because, or is it just the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Like, I don't know. Where's the line?
Yeah, and that's another eternal discussion. And I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing is, obviously,
it should just be called music at this point.
Correct. The people who are creating it at this point, I can't deny the majority of the people that they put in it are being worthy of being recognized as very important musicians.
Yeah,
that's
agree.
Totally accurate. But to call them rock is obviously not accurate half the time.
As far as 2021 goes, we often hear about the new bands that they're not the Led Zeppelin, they're not the Rolling Stones, they're not the Beatles. I hate those comparisons. I don't mind someone saying, oh, they sound like a modern day Stones, or they sound like a modern day Zeppelin. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
What I do mind is this dismissal from rock fans who won't even give these new bands a chance because they're not AC/DC, they're not called Van Halen, they're not called Iron Maiden. That's disappointing, because to me, rock music has given us so much, all four of us on this podcast right now, to turn our back on the new artists. To me, there's no excuse for doing that. I think rock music, or new rock music, the new bands that are coming out, I think they're just as good as the Stones, the Beatles, and Zeppelin. They don't have to be those bands. No one's ever going to be those bands again. But there's no reason why a new path cannot be set, and a new journey cannot be started. So, when I hear that dismissal from fans, I mean, there's so many great bands. We've mentioned, the Dead Dads, we've mentioned Greta, we've mentioned Rival Sons, but from my point of view, there's bands like Joyous Wolf. We mentioned Dirty Honey, Mammoth, Pretty Reckless, all these great bands that are coming out, and there's so much unknown stuff that's not even close to hitting the mainstream. That's just absolutely phenomenal.
Right.
I think 2021 is really the beginning of that next great moment in rock history. I think it has all the elements. I think it has all the pillars of success that will be when we look back on it 20, 25 years from now, like we're doing, on our podcast a lot. We talk about those eras of rock that we all were influenced by. I think this era is going to be looked at as one of the greatest moments in rock history, because There's so many great bands. There's so many great bands from all over the world that are connecting with fans all over the world, that the music is too good to just be forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and you even got bands from the UK. There's a giant UK resurgence right now. And you got bands like Nothing But Thieves and Boston Manor and
Royal Blood.
And
Mysterines are a great band too.
Bring Me the Horizons on top of the world right now over there.
Yeah. The UK's got a lot going on. I think to Jay's point, I've heard it said that psychologically most people quit caring too much about new music, and that often corresponds with like other priorities taking over in life and time being sucked in, and people like us, though not everyone in this conversation has a family and kids and stuff, but people like us are probably more the exception. And so I think if you as a band are trying to chase after the approval of a previous generation, it's probably a fool's errand. Because like you mentioned, a lot of people are going to compare. You're always going to compare the new stuff to the stuff that you have that strong emotional attachment to from whatever period of time. Unless you're just a hardcore music fan. And so, but I think that there's a lot of room for excitement about the future, like you mentioned. And I think part of that also includes bands that are like appealing to the next generations. Like two of the sets that Dan and I watched at Rockville were by Bad Flower and Grandson. And I was thinking about this episode, I came up with the term. I call that anxiety rock. Because those two, among a number of other up and coming artists, they're really good at focusing in on the pressures and the stresses that this younger generation feels and communicating them. And so that resonates with people. And those particular issues may or may not resonate with someone in their 30s, 40s, 50s, beyond, but they're definitely going to resonate with people younger than that. And so you kind of have new artists that are bringing in new fans to rock as well, which is exciting.
And old favorites resurging to help dads like myself feel good, like Limp Bizkit.
There you go.
With the dad vibes.
With dad vibes. There you go.
Great year.
It's been super fun.
To segue into the next question, the next point, which is really the heart of in which will really determine where rock goes, is the connection to the youth of today. Mm-hmm. That 12-year-old to 25-year-old. Obviously, on the 25, you're into a young adult stage, but really that all begins when you're in junior high, middle school, developing your ear, developing your taste in music. Mm-hmm. And, I think back of what I enjoy when I started listening to rock music. It was those 10, even early, because I had an older brother. But do the new bands have enough in the tank or have enough to connect with the youth and keep connecting with the youth? I think that's the biggest question, because the youth of today is so much different than we were, where they're getting pulled in different directions. They're often multi-channeling, meaning, they might have something on a TV and they're looking at their iPad or their phone. So they're multitasking while they're doing one thing, and they're capturing everything. But is there enough there for them to have that lifelong connection to what they're hearing today?
I hope so. What do you think, Casey? You got a thought?
Well, I was going to say it's harder to kind of trying to think of how I want to put this. It's harder to see how that will play out with the attention span, because in generations prior, attention spans were a lot longer, and then our generation attention spans start getting a little bit shorter, and now the future generations, it's like a Vine video. It's only 6 seconds. So I think there are artists out there that are talking about the harder issues and are connecting on a deeper level than typically would happen in the past. And I would want to think that people would listen to that and connect with it, but will it happen over time? I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see.
I think the flip side, we're talking about how easy it is to make and distribute music now. The flip side of that is that the market is flooded, and there are so many bazillions of things at all times trying to vie for your attention. And whenever something has your attention, it doesn't hold it very long, to touch on what Casey was saying. Music seems there's so much more of it, and it seems a lot more disposable. And so it seems like it's harder. Surely has to be harder for a band today than it was, 30 years ago to become a legacy act, to stick around long enough to make, a lasting dent for more than a couple of years. So I don't know what direction. I think music as it is just continuing to evolve. Like Dan mentioned, I'm trickling them before releasing an album rather than like a lead single and then a few after the album releases. And I don't know if that's, good or bad for that point, but it's hard to do. I think the cream always rises to the top, I think, and there will be people who can do it, but it's going to be hard.
It's kind of a bit annoying, to be honest, because you don't know if those singles are actually going to be on the album. And so, if you're into buying a single, then you bought a single, and then they release the album, and you're like, "Damn it! Now I got to buy the single again."
I think, if you're a new band coming up and you don't have, and this may sound ridiculous to some, but if you don't have like a 5-year plan, and I don't mean like a 5-year plan of saving money and stuff, but if I'm talking like a 5-year plan of how you're going to approach an audience and keep that audience in front of you,
right?
Where you can't take those 2-year breaks to make an album anymore.
Right.
You can't do it. You can't. I mean, bands go in the studio. They're in the studio for 2 weeks at the most, and they're pumping out another album. You have to keep pumping out new music so people don't forget about you.
Right.
I think it's much harder to become a legacy artist, as you mentioned, but I think the issue more or less is it goes with that attention span with the youth of today.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be just outrageous to be outrageous. You want to be authentic, right? You want to be authentic in what you do, because there's a difference between being naturally, how do I phrase this? Naturally provocative. Whereas then there's I'm going to do something outrageous because I know somebody will talk about it. And it's so easy,
right? Yes.
So easy for it to get picked up on social media. I think the majority of the bands that are, and you guys are laughing because I know you guys.
What happened this past week?
You guys can have your pee break after the show, but I think when you do look at the bands, whether it's Greta, Dirty Honey, Mammoth, any of the new bands that are coming out, they're great musicians. I think the musicianship is very good with the new bands, but I also don't see that rock star persona where when David Lee Roth was doing an interview on TV, you couldn't take your eyes off the TV. When Ozzy was on TV, you couldn't take your eyes off. There's some good and bad in that, and I think there's some good and bad in how bands approach it now too. I don't think I often thought that we need new rock stars. We need someone to act like a rock star, and I think yes, in a way we do. But I also think the way our society is right now, it's almost impossible to do that.
Right. I was going to say it's harder to capture the fame and hang on to that and survive it. In 30 years ago, that was a different reason with just the drug scene and everything else. That may or may not be as prominent as it was now, but the fame is harder to attain than it was then, I think.
Yes.
I think with like cultural sensibilities, how they've, evolved over the years, I don't know if, I'd be interested to see like how well people would connect to someone that had that, larger than life personality and was really that full on, huge rock star thing. I think that some of those people have such a magnetism, like you said, you can't take your eye off them. But I do think a lot of times nowadays that might be perceived as a little more of a gimmick. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going to more naturally just connect with that person who is super sincere, and has that kind of soul to him. So I think there's room for both, but I would be interested to see like head to head, like what there would transcend and become the bigger deal in the rock world, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think also too that everybody's attitude is different too. You could be a Motley Crue and be total douchebags to everybody and get away with it because you had some of the best music. Now there's, like we've been talking about, there's so much music out there that if you're a jerk to somebody, then they're not going to want to remember you, or they're going to remember you for the wrong things, or they're going to trash you on social media.
Yeah. And
everybody's going to join in, and then you're the laughing stock of Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the latest example with Dave Chappelle. You had, his latest Netflix special come out, and, he's now smack dab in the middle of a controversy.
Right.
Does a new band, Dave Chappelle can withstand that, right?
Yeah, right.
Enough money that he's sitting on that if he's canceled, he never does another stand-up special, he'll be fine.
Yeah, right.
But does a band like a Dirty Honey or Greta Van Fleet, can they withstand something like that? And the answer is no, they can't.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think so.
Right. Yeah.
That's a very good point. And so, yeah, it's different. Like, you can still be a rock star, but it has to be different in some ways.
Yeah, you have to just stand out in the crowd. We're talking on our last show that just, a lead singer or just any member in your band can stand out for different reasons. When we saw Eva Under Fire, they stood out for a couple of reasons. Like, their lead singer, Eva, had a tremendous voice. She had great stage presence. She was all over the stage. They had a guitarist that was just goofy. He was wearing like a one-piece jumpsuit.
Eva Under Fire onesie.
Yeah, and he was just a goofy dude on stage. And then their lead guitarist was like this tall lumberjack dude. And I mean, they just had great stage presence. So I think you can make a name for yourself and just, by being different, by being unique, and by, just being good at what you're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
As the year closes, what is your biggest takeaway of 2021, and what are you expecting in 2022?
That's deep, man.
Let's light the candles, man.
A takeaway. I mean, I'm glad that so much good stuff has happened. And, you ever put it this way, you ever feel sick and you're so sick that you forget what it felt like to not feel sick? You're like, life has always been this. This is terrible. How have I ever existed? That's kind of how 2020 was with music, where it was like, I don't think we're ever going to hear, a great new album a week again. And then 2021 came around after 2020, and it was so much better in that regard. And there was so much creativity, and that pent up energy that people needed to get out artistically and on the stage and everything. And so I think that's going to continue even more now as the world continues to, I guess you could say, get freer and freer from the entanglement of COVID. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to push and these new artists to come out and so much stuff that was not able to happen to start happening again.
Yeah, I'm interested to see in 2022 if the same amount of albums will even come close to 2021, just by the sheer volume of stuff that was released.
Yeah, I think it will. I think we've got as Jay was mentioning earlier, I think we got kind of a resurgence coming along.
Yeah, and I think that 2022, you're going to see a resurgence of a lot of the old faithfuls, so to speak. You have your Korns coming out with an album, Disturbed's in the studio. So, I think that it's going to be much of the same as 2021 in the sense that you're going to have a lot of new bands, but you're also going to have a lot of great bands. But, while 2020 was a little bit of a slow year for music, I don't think that rock music has been slow for the last, 5 to 10 years. We've been doing this top 20 countdown for just as long. And we've had to expand it over time. And then we've added honorable mentions because there's just more and more bands. But I think one difference in 2021 is the variety of bands and the different, the amount of new bands that are making it on the scene and making a name for themselves. Just sheer volume of all these bands that are for one, that are great, and that are, making a name for themselves and just being great in all factions, not just with their music, but live and putting out good music videos. And it's just entertaining.
As we again close the book on the year, and I know we've talked a lot about new bands in 2021 and how far things have come. How do you think 2021 will be defined 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, as we look back on this year?
Could it be as good as 1991, guys?
I don't know. I definitely can't say that yet.
Yeah, obviously.
That is
30 years later, though. Who knows?
a ridiculous bar.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how this stuff influences the future to get there.
And I think a big factor in that, and we mentioned this before, is staying power. Is how many of these bands are gonna stick with it for 10 years?
And that's exactly what I was just getting ready to say. And I think that's going to be the determining factor, is that a lot of these bands, because there's a lot of either first albums or second album bands that we talked about. If we're still talking about them 10 years, and they're probably 5-10 albums into it by that time, and have obviously made a hell of a name for themselves if they're still around.
I think to give an answer like more directly to your question, I think this year will be remembered as the year things started getting back on track, because we've never had a year since popular music existed where everything was shut down for a full year. People could not do concerts and tours. And then this year, there's still a lot of cancellations and stuff like that throughout 2021, even into these most recent months.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there's kind of that explosion of creativity and energy after having it bottled up since February, March 2020.
This next question is something that I've discussed on this show frequently, recently a lot. And it has to do with the choice of chasing streams or chasing radio. I still think radio has a bigger impact on a new band in the beginning, especially like Sirius satellite radio.
I would definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, because I think you can have a song on Spotify or on these streaming platforms, but if no one knows who you are, it doesn't matter. Where I think if you push your music to Sirius, college radio, or these local independent radio stations, these rock radio stations that are in big markets, I think the streams will then follow.
Yeah.
I think now you have this where bands put a song out, and there's, hey, let's get to this many streams, or let's get to this, and I think that's great. I don't want to crap on anyone's marketing plan, because I think there's a reason for everything. But as you tend to focus on what really makes these bands go, is it's that radio airplay. And we briefly mentioned Plush in the beginning of this conversation. Their first song, Hate, came out earlier this year. There's no album behind it at the time. It's just a single, and it got picked up by Octane.
Right.
And it was huge for them. I don't know if they're on the Mammoth tour without that big push from Octane. I don't know if they're opening up for Evanescence and Hailstorm without that big push from Octane. I don't know if they're on the Slash tour coming in the winter of next year. So I think, yes, there are so many great platforms to discover and listen to music, but I still think radio matters more than people want to give it credit for now.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that with Sirius Radio, but I think more so because it's the conversations that it drives. I don't even know how, but I somehow ended up in a fan group of Sirius XM Radio. I don't even have Sirius XM Radio, but I'm in some kind of a fan group with them, and I love it. I love it because that's all we talk about is music, and they're always like somebody in there like, oh, Sirius is playing this song, this is great, or Sirius is playing this band. More people need to check out this band. Hey, how do I get this band requested? And it's just, the more I see them talked about in these groups, the more intrigued I am, obviously, to go look into them and investigate them. And that's when I started streaming them myself. So yeah, I do agree with you. But I think there's different ways too, because I don't necessarily have radio. I don't listen to it, but the conversations that it drives are what leads me to investigating bands.
I think, yeah. And I think places like Octane, like that is a major tastemaker, and that's important to have. And I appreciate what you were just saying, Jay, because that really like validates what we do on a college rock station, because I know one of the main reasons that the Itch formed was sort of in response to the fact that St. Louis radio, despite having multiple rock stations, it was very homogenous. You would, we'll call them legacy artists at this point, these same superstar bands, or that stuff that, barely qualifies as rock, like Imagine Dragons and things like that showing up on there. And it's not to crap on either of those per se, but it made it so much more difficult to be exposed to new things that really truly qualified as rock. And
that's
so
actually how we got our name, is because we found a niche or itch.
Yeah.
St. Louis radio.
Exactly.
Right.
And
Wow.
so that's what we love to do, is show off. Like, we've been talking actually right before this conversation about returning to the studio and what we're going to be playing. And we're excited because so much of what we're going to be playing is going to be stuff that's come out in the past year and a half since the pandemic.
Right.
And we have a backlog of stuff to get to now that's going to take forever.
To squeeze into a 3-hour show every Sunday night.
Right. But we're so excited about that because it's stuff that probably isn't being played on radio. And I'm not trying to overstate our importance. We're a fairly small show in a medium-sized market, but there's still people listening. KCLC has a great signal, to be honest. And so there's room for that. And those rock stations that were playing the same stuff when we started 17 years ago are still playing that kind of stuff now. And so there is a niche waiting for us.
Yeah.
And so that's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's still very important because, like you said, Aaron, it still starts a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think streams really start a conversation.
No.
When you hear a song on Octane or on radio, you're gonna start talking about, I heard this great song on Octane. Or if Octane's pushing them on social media because they've got so many followers, you're going to listen to that platform more than you would just a Twitter feed that is just, pumping out new music. And I think there's a place for both of them, but I think the impact that just like you said, the conversation that can be started leads bands like Plush on tours with Evanescence and Hailstorm. If Plush would have just been focused on streams and not went after radio, and kudos to their management company for recognizing that. Because I think with your management company, you do need a good radio pusher these days.
Yeah.
You need someone that, I hear from a lot of bands that they're going to, spend the money on radio. Well, you can have all the money behind you. If your management company doesn't have the relationships with college radio stations, rock radio, independent rock radio stations in major markets like LA, New York, Chicago, and so on. You need those to get those bands in front of people, and have people listen to that. And I think, I hear a lot of bands and they say, "Oh, my management company, we're gonna push these streams," and it's like I think that's great, but I think the focus is missed there. I think the opportunity is missed.
Yeah, we would agree. I think Spotify and the streaming services are more reflective of how something is doing than the cause, I guess you could say. Even going back to Mother, I looked at their Spotify listenership the other day, and it was enormous compared to what I knew it to be a few years ago. And I'm like, that's because people are being driven there from other places, namely for them, namely TikTok. For a band like Plush, namely something like Octane.
Right. I will say that sometimes these smart apps are too damn smart for their own good. And what I mean by that is that YouTube knows me very, very well. It's actually kind of creepy.
Me too. It scares
It's
me.
tracking you.
Yeah, because like there'll be a new artist that comes out and they're like, "Hey, you should check this out," and I'm like, "Maybe I should." and then I listen to it, and I always tend to like it. I'm always like share the videos with the guys in our chat, and then I'm just like, "Man, damn you, YouTube! You always figure it out." Like, there's not one that they like send me like, "Oh man, this is crap. I don't want to listen to this," but like. I think that's part of it, though. I do agree that yes, that radio does drive it, but I also think that the smart technology that's out there now just is so good at knowing people and understanding how, because what they're essentially trying to do to you is advertise, and the technology behind trying to advertise who, specifically to who you are is just amazing. Where they know now to exactly what type of music down, to sell you basically.
What will be the diary entry for 2021 in rock music?
Welcome back.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
I've missed live music.
That question was intended to be deep and thoughtful, and I get this back. That's great. That's
I think I've already covered everything I could on that topic.
I should have asked that question with like a pipe. The diary entry will be for 2021. I get welcome back, Cotter.
For that too,
No.
I think in general, like you said, welcome back. But it's interesting to see the perspective of the artists that are writing music during this period. And whether it's writing about the pandemic or willing to really bare their soul. And I think of the Pretty Reckless album.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I mean, I've never heard an album chronologically sing about or have the topic of grief and the stages of grief and how all the songs connect with each other in such a beautiful, magnificent way. I mean, when I first heard the album, and I started it, and I was, to the last song, I was overwhelmed that an artist can really speak to that subject. And I think there's a lot of that out there. I think there's a lot of that with artists really sharing emotions that they've gone through, whether it's from the pandemic or even before. And I think, to me, if rock and roll keeps doing that, they will find an audience. Because you guys mentioned anxiety rock. I think it was Aaron that mentioned it.
Yeah.
Dealing with the stresses.
I coined that term. Yeah.
But if you can sing to stuff like that, you're going to connect with people. You're going to connect with younger people who need a voice or are looking for their voice.
I think the Pretty Reckless is such a great example because I think they're able to connect with multiple generations because of who Taylor is and their sound. And, just that combination of musical talent and that vulnerability that she puts out in that. I think they're one of the, I think that album that came out in February, still one of our favorites of the year.
Yes.
Right.
I think that's the one that pushed them into being like, to me, they're A-listers at this point, or at least they're about to be if they aren't.
Yeah.
Like in the rock world.
Yeah. And I think bands like that and Bad Flower and Eve Under Fire and a handful of others, they're not afraid to sing about topics that a lot of it's hard topics that people don't really normally want to talk about, but when you hear it in a song, it makes you feel something or makes you take action for something. And you have a thought there, Dan?
Well, I was just going to say on the flip side of that, not necessarily anxiety rock, but like, a lot of rock that was released this year is like motivational rock in a sense that like, get it like protest rock, like there's Fever 333, Fire from the Gods, Grandson. There's all these bands coming out with political messages and with a lot to say because of everything that's going on around us and the world and basically what happened in the last year to everybody and how it affected different people differently.
Yeah.
Do you think that
Iron Jones is another example? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a great album. Do you think that we talk about the negatives of society, but do you think one of the positive things that's come out recently is that people are so open to listening about mental illness or about people's issues that it it gives musicians, it gives artists a kind of like a permission to go there and sing about those things, which then for people who are looking for a voice, who can't find it within themselves or find it in a song, I think that's a positive thing. I think that's one of the great things of how we're evolving as a society.
I think absolutely a band that epitomizes that transition of rock music to where they have become more open and now their music is completely different than when they started out, but it's more emotional, is Hollywood Undead. You know, they came onto the scene as a club band, and now they're just raw. They tell about their feelings no matter what, and you're just, it's like, whoa, I didn't know this guy that was, you know, the most popular person at the club 15 years ago has like the same emotions that I'm going through. It's just crazy.
And I don't think that, you know, the human connection to authenticity and vulnerability is new per se, but I do think, you know, 2020 was hard on just about everyone, and 2021 has still been pretty hard on a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're talking about bringing mental health out into the open. Like, yeah, we need to be able to talk some stuff out and, you know, release some of the feelings and the pent up pressures and stuff. And so I think that people are craving that openness and that vulnerability. That's why I think that bands like that resonate so well right now. And I think that that's definitely the future. I think that's what you will see in 2022 is a lot more of artists who can do that rising further and further towards the top.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. I think that's a good place to end, and we covered a lot, but I think we really hit home on a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, and it's been a pleasure having this conversation with the three of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jay. We really appreciate. Yeah,
thanks for having us.
We've been wanting to do this for a while, so I'm really glad we could make it happen.
Me too. Let's do it again.
Definitely. We got room for you on an episode coming up pretty soon, I'm sure.
Awesome. For everybody, that's Aaron, Daniel, and KC from the Itch Rock Radio and Podcast Show. You can follow them on the interwebs or on Twitter. I don't know if you guys on another social media platform?
Everywhere is Itch Rocks.
Yep. Itch Rocks. Okay.
Our .com, our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Gmail, all Itch Rocks.
Go ahead and check them out, everybody. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jay Scott. This is The Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast. Stay safe, stay healthy, take care of each other. We'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Well, the names have all changed since you hung around, but those dreams have remained and they've turned around. Who'd have thought they'd lead ya? Who'd have thought they'd lead ya? Back here where we need ya. Back here where we need ya. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. 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 We always could spot a friend. Welcome back. And I smile when I think how it must have been. And I know what a scene you were learning in. Was there something that made you come back again? And what could ever lead you? What could ever lead you? Back here where we need you. Back here where we need you. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back.
300 Favorite Albums with James Campion.
I don't think there's an album I know better front to back. I learned how to play guitar to a lot of these songs.
If I could pick one record to hand someone and say this is what it feels like to be a woman, it would be this record.
You know, the engineer that was recording the album for us was a novice engineer. He was really the janitor.
The first half of these sessions for the album were totally improvisatory in the sense that they went into the studio and just dealt with whatever happened.
There was space that was left for these listeners to kind of discover it for themselves. That they would say, yeah, my parents listened to it, but I had to build my own relationship to it.
Happiness, good living, peace, love, rock and roll. I just feel like this album is such a wonderful translation of that concept.
People understood they were in a world historical moment, and it felt like it was going to last forever. In fact, the infinite spaces that they explored in The Giant Now is part of what made that explosion so huge.